Hello everyone, this is Relax, and this week got a bit of a legacy brew. Got some mono white Eldrazi. So all the Eldrazi decks that have been popular, somewhere between popular and successful, I guess is the right term, in Legacy have been colorless. But after playing with the whitelist in Vintage, I was pretty excited by a lot of the things it had to offer, especially Eldrazi Displacer, and wanted to kind of see uh, what we could do with it porting it over a format. So this deck's almost a direct port of the mono white Eldrazi list I played in Vintage. If you look at a lot of the numbers and a lot of the ideas, you see a lot of parallels. So um, lighter on Eldrazi, no mimics, no endless ones, just the good ones. You want Displacer, Smasher, Seer. You're just playing all good creatures is really part of what's going on here. This echoes down to your mana base. You will notice there are no Eye of Ugins. Um, just because that card's only good at casting Eldrazi. We're not playing like Endbringers or that kind of nonsense. We're just playing, again, good creatures. Moving along, the rest of the good creature package is the white sort of hate bears package. This split is just like a preliminary split. We'll see which ones are the best. I've got some Thalias, I've got some Mystics, I've got some Revokers. Revoker is a little different than it is in Vintage. In Vintage, it's a bit of a 2-mana, 2/1 Stone Rain where it names whatever mocks they have that you don't. But in Legacy, it's a bit more of stopping whatever the problem permanent of the game is. So top, Jace the Mind Sculptor, opposing GT if they get on the board first, Aether Vial, things like that. We have our own Stone Forges as a cheap threat to add to this big package. This card's almost on the line of good enough in Vintage. I'm not sure what the right list is, but if you expect a lot of mirrors, it's pretty good. You got a Batterskull and a GT, not a huge package, but just these are also cards that you're fine drawing on their own. Just casting a Batterskull is fine. Just putting a GT on, I think, is fine. I didn't really want to put a sword because that card's a little sketchy on its own. And then a bunch of Thalias. Thalia's great. I don't know what else to say about the card, but it kind of shows that what you're trying to do is be a little bit of a stack, kind of like Death and Taxes, but with fatter threats. Not quite as much on attacking their mana, like with Rishid Import, but that's because you need less turns to kill them. There's one Thorn of Amethyst to go with the Thalias. I don't know what the right split. I have 4 of this effect, but I don't know where they should go. It could be 2 and 2 or whatever. But you want some solid number of this, and it has to be a non-creature one because actually getting to Reality Smasher under like a Sphere of Resistance is just impossible. 4 Chalice, which is the thing you don't get to do in Vintage. You'll notice that this deck is very heavily designed to play with a Chalice on 1 on the battlefield, as most Legacy Chalice decks are. Hence the Dismember in the main deck over like a Swords to Plowshares. There was some debate over like Declaration in Stone as this slot, but I think that the 1-mana utility of Dismember is good, and we'll see how the life loss goes. Ancient Tomb is definitely taxing, but this is a preliminary list that I'm trying, and we'll see if it's a little too much. Then some Warping Whales. This card's great. Counters Show and Tell, counters Terminus, destroys all sorts of crazy creatures. Ramps you into Thought-Knot Seer and Smasher if needed. Mana, you're heavier on mana sources under the assumption that you just drop one of your creatures and you kill them. But also because I wanted to play Mox Diamond. And the reason for that is when you change your disruption over from Thorn to Thalia, and you have like Stoneforge Mystics and Displacers that you're trying to ramp out, you need a colored mana source to go with it. So you can't go, like that's one of the big things in Vintage is you can go like Plains, Mox Ruby, Thalia. You can't do that in Legacy off of like your City of Traders, but you can do it off of Mox Diamond. So that kind of pushes me towards 26 lands. And this is just like this count here of 14 ramp is pretty close to the Vintage list, which has 8 mana rocks and 8 lands that make 2 mana between Ancient Tomb and Temple. You can't get quite as good in Legacy, but you don't need to quite match the same speed, so it balances out. A bunch of white sources, multiple Karakas and Horizon Canopy to see, get to a spot where your lands do something. If we're going to play 26 lands, we do need to be able to convert some of them to spells. I don't know how many Horizon Canopies I want yet, but I'll start with 1. There's a Mishra's Factory in this kind of bonus colorless land slot. It could also be a Rashad import. And then Wasteland. Card's great. I don't know what else to say about, destroying your opponent's lands. Good work. So moving to the sideboard, we've got a few specific answers. Containment Priest beats the Show and Tell decks, beats Dredge, beats Reanimator, but also is there to handle the Aether Vial decks, both in turning off Aether Vial, but Priest plus Displacer is just kind of this huge trump in creature mirrors, where you get to just exile your opponent's thing. If you read Containment Priest, it tries to enter the battlefield again, but it wasn't cast, so it just stays exiled. And you kind of just have this 3-mana destroyer creature setup that really trumps a lot of the other Aether Vial style decks. Even though this can be a bit of a liability against Flicker Wisp, I like the idea. There's some Rest in Pieces. This is their, it's kind of overkill. Like, I'll never lose to a Dredge deck if I ever have to play against one. But I need some more cards to beat the lands decks. I need to shut off Life from the Loam. Because one of the easiest ways for this deck to lose to the lands is to get Wasteland locked. I've got an Armageddon. I would like to beat lands with this card. I just want to see if it's good. I like the idea. You can't Cataclysm in this deck because access double white's just crazy, but you can Armageddon. It's worth noting there might be one too many Caverns for the sideboard cards, but we'll see. I did already cut the last one to make room for another white source because of how much of an issue white mana access can be. But again, citing the vintage deck that I played, that deck had a Mox Pearl, a Black Lotus, and 10 white lands, including 3 Caverns. And I have 10 white lands and 3 Mox Diamonds, so it's about the same. It's possible this Mishra's Factory needs to be a white source too, but again, that's something we'll see. I've got a couple more Thorns. The other option is either Sworn Canonist, but I think Thorn is better against the Show and Tell decks, so I went in that direction. Canonist is better against Elves, but I don't think that deck's going to be super popular right now. I also have a lot of tools against that deck, like Chalice of the Void, whereas the Show and Tell deck is a little better against this card. And then I've got some spot answers, another Whale to take care of a bunch of stuff, some Source of Plowshares. Those come in specifically. So I mentioned Chalice of the Void. There's a lot of creature matchups in this format, like the aforementioned Aether Vial decks, like the Mirror match, where Chalice of the Void is just not a good card. So you're going to board it out. And in those matchups, you're going to want to Source of Plowshares them. Similarly, Pithing Needle is a 1-drop, but you're going to board that in against like lands in name Wasteland or Thespian Stage or something. And that deck, you're not going to be chalicing on 1 against them. You might be chalicing on 2 to shut off Loam or whatever, but I'm Punishing Fire, but your Pithing Needle is going to resolve. And then you have Ratchet Bomb as kind of a mop up the mess kind of card. Answers random permanents, just kind of does a bit of everything. Another reason I'm not too scared of Elves is I just have a sweeper. So this deck feels a lot like a deck that I've had success with, that I feel is very good in a different but similar format. And I want to kind of learn what we can take from this port and see if this might actually, be a better version of the deck that everyone has been hyped and then lost a little faith in. I think is kind of where Eldrazi's at now, and I think the deck's like legitimately great, and I think that you can make changes to it to bring it back up to speed.